Welcome to the English Core Gallery by Amita Kohli. Class 12 English Core, Book 1, Flamingo. Chapter 1, The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet was born in Nimes, France in the year 1840 and lived till 1897. Let me first give you an overview of the lesson. The story is set in the days of the Franco Prussian War, that is in 1870-71, in which France was defeated by Prussia. In those times, Prussia consisted of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. In this story, Prussia conquers the two districts of Alsace and Lorraine. Order comes from Berlin that there would be teaching of only German language in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and that the German teacher would join the very next day. Thus, that day it was the last French lesson taught by the teacher M Hamel. The lesson has two themes woven into it. The main theme is the story brings out the pain that is inflicted on the people of a territory by its conquerors by taking away the right to study or speak their own language. This is called linguistic chauvinism. The other theme, the sub-theme of the lesson is that it brings out procrastination. It shows the attitude of students and teachers towards learning and teaching, which they always want to postpone. Both the themes will be uncovered as we go through the plot of the lesson. Now the story, it begins with Franz going to school. Franz is late for school and he is fearing a scolding from his teacher. Now being late for school is not the only reason that Franz is fearing a scolding. He is in dread of a scolding for one more reason, and that is that the teacher had given them the homework on participles and he had said that he would question them on participles. But Franz did not know even a single word on participles. He had not done his homework. Franz, he felt like running away. He did not want to go to school. He wanted to spend the day outdoors. He was more interested in watching the birds chirruping and Prussian soldiers drilling, but he resisted the temptation and went to school. While going to school, he crossed the town hall. At the town hall, there was the bulletin board outside, and he notices that there is a huge crowd around the bulletin board. He recalls that since last 2 years, only bad news had come from the bulletin board about lost battles, the draft, the orders. But without stopping at the bulletin board, he rushes towards the school. Let us check the comprehension of what we have read up till now. Why was Franz in dread of a scolding from his teacher? What did Franz find more interesting than going to school? What kind of news had come from the bulletin board in the past 2 years? Students, if you have watched the video carefully, then you will find answers to each of these questions in the slides that we have gone through just now. Let us move ahead. Now Franz, he reaches school. That day the school was silent like a Sunday morning. On usual days there was great hustle and bustle. Noise of the opening and closing of desks could be heard outside on the street. Lessons repeated in unison were loud enough to be heard outside. Teacher's great ruler rapping on the table could also be heard. But today, none of this noise could be heard. Today the school was silent like a Sunday morning. Franz, he banks upon the usual commotion to get inside the classroom without being noticed. Now, why did he bank upon this usual commotion? Because he was fearing scolding from the teacher. So he feels that he will just sneak inside the classroom while there is this commotion everywhere. But today everything was different. All was silent. To his surprise, when Franz entered, M. Hamel did not scold him, and contrary to his expectations, M. Hamel asked him to be seated. The school, it seemed solemn and strange that day. Franz observes the changes in the school. The teacher M. Hamel was wearing his beautiful green coat, frilled shirt and black silk cap, the dress that he wore on inspection days or prize days. The back benches were occupied by the village people. Old Hauser was wearing three-cornered hat. Former mayor, former postmaster and several more were there in the classroom. M. Hamel, the teacher, faces the class, stands on the chair and makes the announcement. He announces to the class that the order had come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, as these were now parts of Germany, and that the new master would join from the next day. So, that day was the last French lesson by the teacher M. Hamel. These words were a shock for France. They were a thunderclap for France. Let us check our comprehension once again. How was the school on that day different from usual days? Why was Franz not able to enter the class unnoticed by M. Hamel? What changes did Franz observe in the classroom? What was the announcement made by M. Hamel? Students, I hope you will be able to answer all these questions if you have watched the video carefully. Let us move ahead. These words were a thunderclap for Franz. Now he understood why there was a crowd around the bulletin board, why M. Hamel was wearing the special dress, and why the backbenches were occupied by the village people. It was their way of thanking the master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing respect for the country that was theirs no more. Franz was now filled with remorse and regret. He was sorry for not learning his lessons and postponing learning. He suddenly developed a liking for his books and teacher. Now he regretted that why he had wasted time and why he had not learnt his lessons. M. Hamel, he says, we have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Reproach ourselves, scold ourselves. And who are we over here? We includes the teacher, the student, and all the villagers who are there as parents. He says so because everyone had been postponing learning until the next day. Villagers prefer to send their children to farms or at mills. Teacher himself often wasted time by telling students to water the flowers or gave them a holiday whenever he wanted to go for fishing. Thus, everyone was responsible for the situation. Let us check our comprehension once again. Which words were a thunderclap to Franz? Why was there a crowd around the bulletin board? Describe the dress of M. Hamel and why was he wearing it? Who all were occupying the back benches of the classroom on that day and why? What was the reaction of Franz to the announcement made by M. Hamel? My dear students, I hope answers to all these questions are clear to you. Now the teacher M. Hamel teaches the last lesson in the class. He teaches the class that French is the most beautiful language in the world and they must remember it as language is the key to their freedom. He teaches them that French, their mother tongue, is the most beautiful language, the most logical language, and they must remember it if they want freedom, because their language, their mother tongue, is going to serve as the key to the prison of slavery. After talking about the importance of French language, M. Hamel, he took a lesson in grammar. And that day Franz understood everything. because he was paying attention, and M Hamel was also explaining with patience. Then Hamel took a lesson in writing that day. He had brought new copies for them and he made them write France, Alsace, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. All was silent. Only the sound of scratching of pens on paper could be heard. On the roof, the pigeons cooed, and Franz wondered, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? Now, this thought of Franz has a lot of meaning in it. Will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? These words have a lot of sarcasm. This is a satire on the Germans, that they can exercise their power only on the humans, the Frenchmen, not on the birds and the animals. After the lesson in history and then in alphabets, everyone was emotional and crying. The church bell struck 12. Sound of the trumpets could be heard. Prussians returning from the drill could be seen. M. Hamel becomes very emotional at the end. His voice chokes. He turns towards the board and writes, Viva la France, and with a gesture of his hand dismisses the class. He is unable to speak. So he faces the board, he turns his back towards the class and simply writes on the board, Viva la France, that is, long live France. And just with a gesture of his hand, he tells everybody to leave the class. Comprehension check once again, students. What did M. Hamel teach in the last lesson? Why did M. Hamel say that language is the key to freedom? Why was France able to understand the language, the lesson on the last day? Why did France say, will they make them sing in German? Describe the emotions of M. Hamel at the close of the last lesson. I hope, students, you are able to answer all these diagnostic questions and you have comprehended the lesson. If you are able to answer all these short answer questions, then that means you have understood all the main points of the lesson, which is very, very important for you to answer the short answer questions based on the lesson. Now, besides the short answer questions, students, there are long answers also, 120-word answers, which are very important. Here are some of them based on the lesson. Discuss the aptness, appropriateness of the title, the last lesson. Now, students, whenever we are discussing the title, whenever we are discussing the aptness or the appropriateness of the title, we must make the title the center point or the pivot point of the plot of the characters and make the plot revolve around the title. Now here it is the last lesson. So how are we going to write that this particular lesson title is correct? It is apt. First of all, we need to mention that why this last lesson came. It came because of the order from Berlin. So we will mention first the order from Berlin and what that order said. And according to it, that day then it was the last lesson in French. And then in that last lesson, what did M. Hamel teach? So when you will write everything here, it will make 120 words. Then second question, bring out the theme of the lesson, the last lesson. In the beginning of the video, I told you the two themes of this lesson. You can go through the video again to have a look at the theme. The main theme of the lesson is it talks about the pain that is inflicted on the people of a territory when the right is taken away from them to speak their own language. And here in this particular lesson, the right to speak French was taken away by the Frenchmen of Alsace and Lorraine. And so the pain that they felt because of it, and this pain, it was evident how the way they all studied, the way they all were present in the last class, that showed the pain that they were going through. Then the second theme of the lesson, the theme of procrastination. That is also very much evident. The parents, villagers, the student France, the teacher M Hamel, how they had been procrastinating, postponing learning and teaching. And because of that, now the last day had come. There could not be any more postponement, and it was because of this postponement only that this day had arrived. So you will explain the theme, both the themes. Then the third question, look at the third question, draw the character sketch of M Hamel. M Hamel is the most important character here in the lesson. His character sketch, we find him to be very, first of all, we find him to be patriotic. The way he teaches, in the last lesson he teaches about not forgetting their mother tongue, their language, as it is the most beautiful language, and that it will serve to be the key to their prison of slavery. And then he is a very devoted teacher, a very sincere teacher. The way he teaches in the last lesson, yes, there was one negative point also in him, that he too was a procrastinator. He had given holiday to the students whenever he wanted to go for fishing. He would tell them to water the flowers whenever he did not feel like teaching. So you will mention all the positive character traits as well as this one negative character trait of M Hamel. Right, class? So this is how you must mention you must write all the points, the content points, all content points should be present in the 120 word answer. Now, based on this particular lesson, there is this one writing skill, notice writing. This will give you a revision of writing a notice. Write a notice for the Alsace notice board mentioning the order received from Berlin. You are Rushang, the mayor of Alsace. This you can practice. Then students, from here begins the points, the main points of the last lesson. What I have done is I have divided the complete lesson into sub parts, and to every part I have given a heading, a subheading, and then the main points under it, so that you remember the main points of the lesson. So you can go through it. Like France, in the beginning, France is late for school. He is late for school and he is dreading a scolding from his teacher. He had not done his work on the participles. The teacher had said that he would question them on participles. So he was afraid of a scolding. Then when he crosses the bulletin board, he sees that there is a crowd around the bulletin board, and then he recalls that in the last 2 years, since the time war was going on, only good and bad news had come from that bulletin board. But today he was in no mood to stop there and see what was the order put up on the bulletin board. He straight goes to the school. After that, when he reaches the school, there is a description as to how the school it looked like on usual days. On usual days, there was hustle, bustle, noise, then teachers, ruler rapping on the table, then the lessons being recited in unison, and the noise of the opening and the closing of desks could be heard. But that day the school was quiet like a Sunday morning. There was no sound at all. All were present in the class. All were in time. And on that day, the classroom also, it was very different. The back benches were occupied by the villagers, the old hosser, the postmaster, the former mayor. The teacher himself was wearing a special dress that he otherwise used to wear only on prize days or on inspection days. Then the teacher, he makes the announcement of the order that had come from Berlin. Now this order that he announces, these words were a thunderclap, a shock for France, that the order that it said that now only German would be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. Then this was followed by M Hamel. He teaches the class the last lesson. The first thing that he says is that they all needed to reproach themselves. The villagers, who are the parents, the student, the teacher, they all needed to reproach themselves. Why? Because they had all postponed teaching and learning. And then M Hamel, he teaches the importance of French language, the importance of their mother tongue, Then he teaches them a lesson in participles. That day France understood everything very well. Then he takes a lesson on writing. He had brought new notebooks for them and he made them write France, Alsace, France, Alsace. Then he took a lesson in history. At the end, he was very emotional. He turned towards the board. M Hamel was emotional. He turned towards the board and wrote on the board, Vive la France, that is, long live France. My dear students, I hope the lesson is very clear to you. Go through the video again and again, comprehend all the main points, and you will be able to answer all the short and the long questions based